Welcome back, Tribe. We have a video here from the New Men's Movement by Thinking Ape. Let's see.
It's kind of interesting, and I'm not sure if you picked up on this, but in recent years, very recent years, as in the last 2 years, there has been a wellspring of a type of interest in the plight, if you will, of men and boys. People talk about it a lot more than they used to. 10, 12 years ago, when a lot of us, myself included, Barbarossa, were talking about this a lot, mum was the word, and there was basically no discussion in the mainstream. Now you will get a number of personages talking about these things every now and then. Chad Williams, one of them. And you get certain authors, like this guy Richard Reeves, who wrote this book of Boys and Men. And recently Chad Williamson got a guy on called George the Tin Men, with the title, Why Do the Left Not Care About Men's Problems? Indeed, so there's been this upsurge of seeming, quote-unquote, interest in the plight and affairs of men and boys. But the real question, as I always like to ask, is, does it really matter? A lot of information that used to be commonplace in the manosphere, that has been talked about for a very long time, the empathy gap. All this ultimately stems from the empathy gap, as you're well aware. This was very well documented, as I said, by others. Barbarossa, way back in the day, was probably the first person online to regularly talk about it in a powerful and convincing manner. And over the years, I've tried to make my contributions to that too. But if you look at the quote-unquote men's move of the past, MRAs, this sort of thing, almost all of them were regarded as freaks, and almost all the rhetoric fell on deaf ears. Well, fair enough, different era, different time. Can't really blame people for that. And these new guys aren't really MRAs, men's rights activists, but they're trying to make the case for men and boys, especially a guy like Richard Reeves of Boys and Men. He wrote this book. He's appeared on a number of podcasts. He's been online. He's been in the news. But I don't think anything's going to change. I hate to be the Debbie Downer, the negative Nancy, but to quote Phil Collins, this is the world we live in, and these are the hands we're given. You notice with all these guys, with their so-called advocacy for men and boys, they preface everything they say with women are really important, we can't forget about women.
I'm so glad he brought that up. It is like basically controlled opposition. It's like the powers that be know that there's an issue, know that men are feeling there's something wrong, know that they're being demonized. They know it's gone too far, but they can't loosen their grip on the amount of money they're making on women. So in order to act like they care or act like this is being brought to their attention, they have these Richard Reeve controlled opposition types. That's what it feels like, because it's like, I'm not saying women are bad. I'm not saying we shouldn't bring up girls. I'm not saying, but can we think about boys too? Like, why can't you just outright say men are in trouble? Boys are in dire straits. They need help. Let's stop talking about women for a second. Let's stop talking about forwarding girls' rights and getting them ahead in all metrics of society. And let's pause for a second on all this girl power bullshit and let's talk about young boys. We can't say that. Every single fucking message is prefaced with this bootlicking. Girls are great. Yes, we've made so much progress with women. And I'm not saying we should stop the progress, but such horseshit. This is how you know you can't really speak your mind. This is how you know the powers to be, those with control, how they feel about said movement, how much teeth this movement has. Until men are able to speak freely about how they feel, until we're able to call a spade, look at society and say, these are the issues. Here's how much men are falling behind. Here's how boys are being affected in school. Here's the real problems. None of this shit really matters. I'm telling you. This is why I personally always preach about the self-improvement, the no one's coming to save you, nobody cares, it's all on you. There will be no change because of money. Women spend far more than men. The lion's share of profits for corporations come from women. Women control spending in households even where they have men. It simply makes sense to market to them and make sure that we bring them up in society so that they produce as much money as possible, because there's no pushback from women. They do as they're told. They're natural followers. It's very easy to convince them of something. If the group decides that's the direction, a woman won't raise her hand and go against the group. It's not in their nature. It's like it's the perfect person to sell and market to. Instead of busting your ass to convince a man of the utility value of whatever product you're trying to sell, instead of convincing a man why he needs this item in his life, you can just by consensus convince a woman a purse is better than the other one. Not that it has more pockets, Not that it'll last longer, not that the material's better. It's just simply a logo on top, and a beautiful woman was seen having it with a Chad boyfriend, living the lifestyle, getting flown out, slap $5,000 on it, and everybody goes crazy. It sells out in seconds. I mean, it's really the game, man. The game is money. The game has always been money. There's no money in young boys. There's money in young girls.
And we're not trying to diss women. We're not trying to dismiss women. We're not trying to make women lose anything. I don't view it as a zero-sum game. If men win, then women lose. So a lot of caveats, a lot of pretexts, a lot of this and that. And I don't blame them. They kind of have to say that sort of thing, especially if they're operating in the mainstream. Fundamentally, these people don't understand something. No one has ever really cared about men. That is the lot of being a man. All this ultimately, if you want to be very reductionistic about it, goes back to the simple equation of sperm are cheap and eggs are expensive. Women are a more valuable reproductive asset for the continuation of a species than are men. You know, the famous scenario of you have a village where 99% of the women get wiped out and most of the men are around. Well, the village is kind of screwed. However, if 99% of the men get wiped out, but most of the women are around, well, that guy's going to be pretty happy, to say the least. Although he might be stressed out as well. Yes, he would be stressed out. And so civilization is an outcropping of that. Civilization is
And it's, very simple. In wartime, when a village got taken over, when a warring tribe came, successfully won the war, they killed off all the men, all the young males, and kept the women around. That's really it. That's what it is. This is seen in animals too. Males fight for the attention of a woman, and the winner gets to pass down his lineage. He gets the right to reproduce. It is what it is. Titanic, men get in the water, they die, women and children first. It is what it is. You have no value as a man, you have to build it. You're not a man until you prove yourself to be one. You're just a boy in a man's body. That's what it is. I keep telling you guys, you are loved for your utility that you could provide to society. That's the value placed on you. Fortunately for us, that means it's limitless. You can grow into a high-powered, high-value man no matter where you come from. Women have a more rigid value system where it's just based on their looks. On the front, it's much easier for them. Nature gives them an easy life, but also boxes them in a corner because once the looks fade, so does a ton of their value. That's the name of the game. It's biology, boys. It's nature. You're going to have to deal with it. There's never going to be a society, at least not in the foreseeable future, where we're all still alive. Don't know what the woke future looks like, but there won't be a society where we're going to be perfectly 50-50 even. How are we going to undo the programming? Because women look at us in a certain way as genetic potential, as the way we look at a job. Simply, how good will his sperm be for my kids? How well can he protect me? How well can he gather resources? It is a reductionist view, but that's the underpinning of what a woman finds attractive in a man. No matter how far society advances, no matter what, that amalgamation of attraction will exist. Whether you have the Ferrari, the CEO title, the whatever it is, all that status, all that money, all that, it just represents those simple things: resources, protection. That's the game, man. That's why no one cares, and you have to save yourself.
Derivation of that. We look out for the welfare of women. We care more about women. That's all derivative of all of that. The infamous or famous axiom of women and children first when the Titanic is sinking. I could go on, but you obviously know what I'm talking about. So that is just the state of affairs. Now, the reason why in earlier times, say the earlier mid-20th century, people still nominally, ostensibly, cared about the needs, wants, desires of men was because of the perception that their labor was an absolute necessity, which is still the case to this day, mind you, but is very much out in the open. If you want civilization to keep on chugging along, you needed men, and therefore you couldn't neglect men. You had to support them in their endeavors. You had to make sure that they didn't fall by the wayside, because every man who did fall by the wayside would not be able to contribute. So even 70, 60 years ago, the seeming concern for men was not really concerned so much as a pragmatic.
And war, let's really put it out there in the open. War was a big thing back in the day, like constant trench warfare, bodies. But before all this technological advancement with drones, with missiles, with all this shit, it took men with guns in their hand, before that swords in their hand, bows in their hand, up front, hand to hand. You literally needed bodies upon bodies to wage war. So it made sense that you had to cater to men because the smaller population typically lost. So you did all you could to breed the strongest men, make sure they had the best lives, the best nutrition possible for the time, to amass the largest body count to go roll over other nations or impose your will. It was in the interest of the state, the interest of the leadership, to produce as many people as possible, men specifically, because the chances of you going to war and needing an army of bodies was extremely high in everybody's lifetime. That's what it is, man. We've been disposable since the beginning of time. Again, goes back to the sperm and the egg.
Recognition that, yeah, we need these guys and therefore we can't really neglect them. These days, through the mechanization effect, through technology, we've come to live in a world that's veiled. We don't see the intricate workings of what's going on anymore. So we don't see the telephone pole workers anymore. We don't see the sewage treatment plant workers. And as concerns the visible men out there, like garbage men, etc., we just take them for granted. It's very easy in today's world to cover all the important contributions of men up. It was much harder in a former time. So sure, as I've already stated, that did not come from a concern for men. That came from a concern for the practical necessity of supporting a population that needs to do certain things to keep civilization chugging along, to maintain the modern world as we know it. Now, as everything has become veiled and we just don't know what's going on and people don't pay attention to the nitty-gritty details, the cogs, as it were, and men are absolutely required to maintain these cogs, as I've stated here and in many, many videos, it's almost impossible for many people, especially women, to conceive the idea that men are necessary, that to neglect men, and especially boys as they're growing up, is to, in part, create a generation of ne'er-do-wells, potentially. However you want to define ne'er-do-well here. Because ultimately, that's all that people really care about when it comes to men. Be useful. Do something productive. No one is ever going to care about men. It's just not the reality we inhabit. These big shots out there, whether they're podcasters, multimillionaires, whatever, yeah, they're in the spotlight because they're important because they did stuff. Remember what they say. Men are human doings and women are human beings. It's always been that way and always will be that way. If you're really lucky, you might have a family that cares about you. And because you're genetically related to them as a man, they will give a damn about you. Maybe. And if you're even luckier, you might have a friend group of males that view you in the sense of brotherhood and actually care about your well-being and look out for you. That's also possible. But the greater world out there, forget about it. Women, forget about it. Women will look at you in the sense of you're attractive and useful, so there you go. They'll pair up with you. Your underlying humanity, broadly speaking, will not be acknowledged. And I challenge anyone to contest that view. People would accuse me in this case of making generalizations and painting a picture with too broad a brush. Sorry, though, look at the world that we exist in. Does it look like people, women, or otherwise care about men's well-being? No. Men need to fix themselves, they need to get their act in order, blah, blah, blah. Women suffer, we need to help women. That's how it is. Unless you change human beings at the genetic level, and therefore at the level of psychology, the level of the brain, any attempt to help men en masse is always going to fail. Men are en masse invisible. Men as individuals are invisible unless they're doing something important. And the second they stop doing something important, they're invisible again. How are you going to get people to care about that? Absolutely impossible. Now, given all of this, I thought it would be fitting to end the video with some wise words from the late, great Barbarossa. By late, great, I mean he hasn't been on YouTube for a very long time and he retired. But nonetheless, some of his videos from the past are prescient. And I think this snippet from this old school video of his is very telling and very on point.
It's the cold hard reality that men need to face and address. You will find no solace in the bosom of a woman, I assure you. No, you see, it's time for men to stand up and look around them and see that it is a very cold place and you're the only one that can pull yourself out of that frigid abyss. You. There is no mommy coming to save you, men. There is no mommy to make you feel safe. And as a matter of fact, women despise men that show any weakness because they want to be taken care of. That's right. They despise you for wanting the same things that they demand from men. Security, protection, reassurance, etc. These things a man must earn by overcoming insecurity and danger in order to earn self-assurance, which women apparently respond to. So that still just boils down to one fundamental truth in regards to this society. Men, you are alone in the eyes of this society, and the only ones that will be rewarded are the ones that perform and perform well according to society's standards. If you think for a second that in this society your inherent personhood as a man matters, you are sorely mistaken. This society just does not care, And there exists a very real power in knowing exactly where one stands as a man, no matter how desolate and isolated the situation is.
That's just a brutal truth you have to deal with. That's part of swallowing the red pill. And there is power in understanding the game and the rules to it, because now you can begin to play clearly. For those that I see in the comment section saying, what's the point of even trying? The society hates me. There's going to be no society. Let it all burn. Saying stuff like that. You are exactly the kind of man society wants to get rid of. You're the weak link that it's set up to make sure does not pass its genes down. You gave up on the game. You gave up on the competition. You're the male in the animal kingdom that instead of squaring off and taking challenges on and competitors, you turned your back, walked away, and therefore your genes will not pass on. That's the brutal truth. There will be no society, if this one quote unquote burns down, that will come up after it in the ashes, that will value you the way you think you should be valued. For all the talk we do in the red pill about a woman's inherent value when she's young and how she loses it after the wall and all this stuff and the snickering and the laughing that you do in the comments at quote woke women, modern women, whatever you call them, you have to apply that same truth in reality to yourself and your value in society as a man. If you're going to laugh at women for devaluing themselves in modernity, in the hedonism, exercising options with zero care for consequences, then you have to understand that you are exercising certain options to you with certain consequences to your bloodline. And you can cope all you want in the comments, and you can say just how empowered you are for giving up on the game and how free you feel and all this shit, but it is a cope, because all you do is you watch videos like this, dunking on women, you get a little rise out of it. That's the brutal truth. The people that come in here saying how they've quit, how they're over it, how they're so free going their own direction, yet they're obsessed and constantly watch these kinds of videos, which is funny because it's what the women do that constantly bitch about men and say how they're dusties and losers, but that's all they can talk about. That's all that's on their mind. Yet we on this side of the aisle recognize like, wow, who hurt you? If you really didn't care, you wouldn't be consuming that kind of content or talking about it. So obviously it bothers you. It's the same on the men's side. You have to understand the hypocrisy here. You can't say you feel good about checking out. Watching videos like this makes you feel good. Let society burn. Women ain't this, women ain't that. But you're glued to the screen on content like this. Your YouTube feed, your shorts, reels, everything is absolutely dominated by quote red pill content dunking on women. You keep having to convince yourself and everybody in the comment section of why you not being able to get a woman, and you quote chose your own way. Most of these guys say they chose to check out. No, you were forced to check out. You had no choice. No woman wanted you. Now you coped and said you went your own way instead. I mean, that's the brutal reality here. And these are the ones that do the mirror of what the women are doing. You've only ever had this single power as a man. It's in your own two hands. It's called accountability. Coupled with discipline will take you a long way. All of you watching, even the ones that are the most bitter, that can't swallow that pill, can absolutely change your life. And not in some motivational self-help bullshit. Literally, the possibilities are endless if you're willing to sacrifice. And sacrificing is a normal part of a man's life. If you give up the vices, if you give up the things that waste your time, I don't have to name them. I keep calling them out in almost every video when I talk about men. You know exactly what it is. And there will be copers in the comments again saying how a few hours here, how they're doing so well in life that they're allowed to indulge in these copes, that it doesn't affect them, that they're oh so mature and so much better and have complete control over themselves. How they don't need to stop doing these things. Instead of sacrificing, instead of doing the things you hate to do, instead of grinding it out day by day to get better, to get more happiness derived from completing goals, from advancing in life, from naturally building up attraction from women, potentially getting a family, a brotherhood. They rather cope in the comments talking about how they prefer to stay in their room, do nothing, not attempt anything. What's the point? But if you choose to walk the difficult path, as a man, you will be rewarded. Nobody can hold your hand and take you to the water and force you to drink. This message will fall on deaf ears if you're not ready to receive it. And that's the cold, hard truth. There will be very few men, maybe 100, that watch this and it resonates with them, and it might have a light bulb moment and they might start making a change in their life, and even fewer still will be able to consistently chase this goal through whatever obstacles come up and find themselves on the other side. And if you don't want to do this, the alternative is the mediocrity you're living in, the loneliness, the crippling boredom, the sadness, the depression, the wishing and the daydreaming, the constantly injecting yourself into the digital realm to forget about your current, your reality. That's your life. That will be your life forever. Why not make the change? What do you have to lose?